It's cold. My feet are freezing. It hurts. Help me." In my thin clothes, tattered and dirty, barefoot, I held my baby and headed to my parents' house. After getting off the last train, I walked for about 2 hours through the snowy rural roads in the dead of winter. When I saw the lights in my parents' house, tears started to flow. I finally made it back here. Mom, thank you. It might be hard to believe, but I was helped by my deceased mother and managed to return home. I rang the doorbell, and after a while, my brother appeared and was shocked to see me. "What happened to you? You look..." "They took my phone and wallet. Those people, they're not family." Then he noticed the bruises around my arms and eyes, and he raised his voice in anger. "Who did this to you?" I'm Jane, a 28-year-old housewife. I met my husband Ted as colleagues at work. He kindly guided me as a colleague when I was a new employee, still unfamiliar with the job. Ted, who was bright and efficient at his work, became my crush, and when he asked me out, I felt like I was dreaming, and of course said yes. After dating for about a year, we decided to get married, and Ted visited my family's home. My family home is a brewery deep in the mountains, where my father and brother work. They make craft beer with water from the mountain springs, renowned for its exquisite taste. My father and brother, despite running it themselves, have won various awards and export abroad, with reservations months in advance. Seeing our old house and brewery, Ted muttered in astonishment. "It's like we've time traveled to the past." Right? It's been going since my grandpa's time, and my brother is the 3rd generation. Ted, a good conversationalist, quickly got along with my reserved father and brother. After he left, my brother said thoughtfully, "If Mom were alive, she'd be so happy to know Jane is getting married." My mother passed away from illness when I was in middle school. She seemed to know her time was short and gave me a pendant before she passed. "I'll always be by your side, Jane." I always felt that she was watching over me, happy. Meanwhile, Ted grew up in a single-parent home after his parents divorced early. The first time I met his mother, Natalie, she was very kind. "Jane, I'm so glad to meet you. I always wanted a daughter," she said, making me feel like we could get along, but the first year of marriage was happy without any issues. Ted, wanting support at home, asked me to quit my job and become a housewife. Ted, raised by Natalie, did nothing when he got home, just watching TV or on his phone. "Ted, could you at least take your dishes to the kitchen? Or put your clothes in the laundry basket after showering?" When I asked, he seemed to realize and said, "You're right. Couples should help each other. I'll be more careful." And he started helping a bit. He was a kind husband back then. Things changed suddenly when Natalie fell ill and asked to live with us. We couldn't leave Natalie alone, so we started living together. I think it started with trivial arguments. Seeing my husband take his dishes to the kitchen after meals, Natalie frowned and showed displeasure. "Ted, you don't need to do that. Stop it." "But, Mom..." The moment Ted glanced at me, Natalie's anger turned towards me. "Are you the one telling him to do this? Making Ted help with chores after a tiring day at work is a failure as a wife." I'm sorry. In my family, we all help out with what we can." "Your family? Just a low-level household making craft beer in the mountains. Don't compare them with Ted, who works at a top company." "That's terrible." My husband, who heard the conversation, not only failed to defend me, but had a nasty smirk on his face. Since then, he became a henpecked husband, ordering me around with just words like food, shower, coffee. Natalie, who claimed to be ill, showed no signs of it and started to harassing me energetically. She pushed all household chores onto me: cooking, dishwashing, laundry, cleaning, and she complained incessantly. Your cooking is bland and tasteless. That's what happens in a household without a mother. Mom taught me to make light meals for health. You're complaining about our household's way? No, that's not what I mean. You really are an unlikable woman. Ted should have married someone better from a good family. I don't see what's good about you. That's terrible. My husband, who pretended not to see, began to harass me like Natalie. You really can't pay attention to details. Learn from Mom and treat me better. How much more could I care for him? I kept my thoughts to myself and didn't speak out. Then something happened that pushed me further. My husband came home from work with a stern expression. When I asked why, he said a colleague who joined the company at the same time was promoted to team chief. You know him, right? John. He's not even as good at work as me. I knew John from when I worked with him. He was considerate and kind to everyone, a team player rather than trying to take credit for himself. I said something I shouldn't have. John is a thoughtful person. Suddenly, my husband glared at me furiously and threw his coffee cup at me. The sound of the cup breaking echoed, and I felt pain on my cheek. You think John is more capable than your husband, me? Natalie also blamed me. Really the worst woman. Can't do household chores and looks down on her husband. Crying, I cleaned up the broken cup. After that, my husband started taking out his frustration from work on me. Suddenly exploding in anger, throwing things, hitting, kicking. Natalie, far from stopping him, watched and laughed. I started to consider divorce, but then I found out I was pregnant. Knowing this, both Natalie and my husband's mood improved. I thought maybe after the baby was born, they would go back to being kind, so I decided to endure a little longer. When I told my father and brother about the pregnancy, they were overjoyed. Eagerly, they sent baby clothes and toys. They thought I was living happily and were glad. The pregnancy went smoothly, and a boy was born. My husband named him Eric. We did it! A boy! And he looks just like Ted as a baby. He's adorable. Natalie and my husband were thrilled. But their treatment of me didn't change, still treating me like a housekeeper. In fact, it got worse. My room was moved to the storeroom. Natalie took care of my son, and I only saw him during breastfeeding. My wallet and phone were taken and I couldn't escape. Still recovering from childbirth, I worked hard as a housekeeper. A housekeeper planning to eat with us? What? Where should I eat then? Housekeepers eat leftovers in the kitchen. If you don't like it, leave Eric and go. I couldn't leave my son and couldn't escape without my phone or wallet. My husband took all my savings from my single days. Endless chores, no time to care for myself. My hands and skin became rough. Glancing at a mirror, I saw a gaunt woman in tattered clothes reflected back. Realizing it was me, I felt a mix of sadness and pity. To avoid being hit or kicked, I silently worked as a housekeeper, following my husband's orders. I think I was mentally cornered. One day, while breastfeeding my son, I fell asleep from exhaustion. Suddenly, a figure appeared before me. I braced for Natalie, but it was my deceased mother. Mom, you're alive! I'm struggling. My mother spoke sadly. Escape now. If you don't, you and your child will be in grave danger. Open the pendant. I woke up, realizing it was a dream. But following her advice, I opened my pendant and found several $100 bills, and a note telling me to use them in trouble. I quickly fled out the back door, holding my baby and wearing only sandals. I caught a taxi and made it to the station, just in time for the last train. After a 2-hour train ride, I arrived at the station near my parents' house late at night. It was a deserted rural station. I had no choice but to walk home. It was cold. My feet were freezing. It hurt. Help me. In my thin, tattered clothes and bare feet, I held my baby and headed to my parents' house. When I saw the lights of my home in the snowy night, tears flowed. I finally made it back. Mom, thank you. My brother appeared after I rang the doorbell, shocked at my state. What happened to you? You look... They took my phone and wallet. Those people, they're not family. Noticing the bruises on my arms and around my eyes, he was furious. Who did this to you? My father came down and was equally shocked. Inside, they warmed me up, and my brother made my favorite warm café au lait. After telling them everything, both my father and brother were enraged. But, fearing that my husband and Natalie might be panicking, they called home to inform them that my son and I were at my parents' house. 3 days later, my father and brother went to my in-laws' house to collect mine and my son's belongings. Surprised by their sudden visit, my father and brother only managed to bring back a small bag of clothes. Thanks, but what about Eric's clothes? That's the thing. They refused to hand over Eric, saying he's their son. They said they'll come to pick up later. They also have something to tell you. They'll be here soon. That's impossible. I can't be separated from Eric. But I don't want to go back there. What should I do? I was at a loss, but my brother was surprisingly calm and smiled. Don't worry, we won't let you go back there. And Eric too. Dad is handling it, so leave it to us. But you need to be strong for Eric. Listen carefully to what I'm about to say. He then shared a plan regarding our interaction with them. I steeled myself. Later, my father returned with some guests, discussing something in the back room. Soon after, my husband and Natalie arrived at our home with stern faces. The moment my husband saw me, he started yelling. What are you doing running away from home like this? I thought he might hit me, but my brother glared at him from behind, preventing him from striking. And you got me demoted at work. You must have said something to my boss. My husband claimed his boss said he couldn't trust someone who doesn't care for his family with important tasks. I didn't say anything. Liar! Want to be heard again? Then that's when someone emerged from the back room. So it's true, you treat Jane like that. CEO, why are you here? My husband turned pale and was in disarray. Turns out, my father and the CEO were childhood friends and close companions. My brother and I had been fondly looked after by him since we were children. A person like you doesn't seem suitable for our company. It would be good for you to go to the countryside for a while to cool your head. That's terrible. Urged by my brother, I glared at my husband. I can't live with you anymore. I'll file for divorce. I'll raise Eric. Divorce? Hearing this, Natalie interjected. Eric is our grandson. We can't hand him over. If you're divorcing, you useless woman should just leave. Another friend of my father's came out of the back room. A lawyer. He explained that the divorce would go through and that I would undoubtedly get custody of young Eric. Natalie, stunned and crying, suddenly changed her tune and pleaded. Jane, I apologize for everything up till now. Please don't take Eric away. Wasn't it Natalie who tried to take Eric from me? It's too late now. Eric is my child and I can't hand him over. You, without a job, plan to make Eric suffer? I've received permission from the CEO to work at my former company again. Plus, Dad and my brother will support me, so don't worry. That's terrible. I turned towards my husband. There was still more to be said. I want my savings from before we were married and my mobile phone returned. And I won't forgive you for hitting and kicking me. I'll report you to the police. Hearing police, my husband's face changed. Police? You can't report without evidence. I showed him the hospital's diagnosis report and the images on my mobile phone. I have the evidence here, and I have recordings of your terrible treatment towards me. My husband's eyes widened, and he started begging. Jane, please don't report to the police. I apologize. I'm terribly sorry. My husband bowed deeply in apology. It's too late. The police have already heard this exchange. Another friend of my father's came out of the back room, the local police chief. His subordinates were also with him. Despite his reluctance, my husband was taken away by the police. Afterwards, I divorced my husband. Wanting to cut ties with him and Natalie, I had them pay a lump sum for compensation and child support. I also got back my savings from before marriage. My husband was sentenced. He got a suspended sentence, but was sternly warned by the police. Due to his conviction, he was fired from the company. Rumor has it, to pay the compensation and child support, my in-laws had to sell their house and land. The neighborhood gossiped about how they mistreated and drove out their daughter-in-law, making it impossible for them to live nearby. Now Natalie and he live in an old apartment in the countryside, juggling multiple part-time jobs to get by. I'm set to return to my former company when Eric turns 1. We are now living peacefully at my parents' house. Loved by my father and brother, my son is growing up healthy.